Hey everyone, this is Keir from rugbystrengthcoach.com. Today's video is all about some little things that you can do in your own training to increase the rate at which you develop strength, speed and power in your training program. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, it's also going to allow for a lot more vivid and empowered learning of your athletes. They're going to be able to perfect their movement technique a lot quicker, and it's going to lead to stickier learning. So it's going to lead to movement learning which they retain for longer periods of time. And this whole video can be summed up from a quote by the Dutch athletics coach Frans Bosch. And he basically says that the athlete has remarkably little interest in what the coach has to say. And there's a study which illustrates what he's talking about quite nicely. In this particular study, a group of elite discus throwers were separated into two separate groups. In one group, the athletes trained, and the only information they received was the distance of each throw that they attempted, knowledge of results. In another group, the athletes were placed with an elite discus throwing coach, and the information that they received was the knowledge of their performance. So, in the opinion of the coach, how well they performed on each throw. These two groups went away and trained for a period of time, and when they came back and retested their discus throws, the group that received knowledge of results outperformed the group which received knowledge of performance quite significantly. Now, as upsetting as this may be for strength and conditioning coaches who like to talk to their athletes 24/7 and be really involved in the learning process, there are probably a couple of reasons as to why this happened in the study. One is that athletes can often suffer from kind of analysis paralysis when they're learning or perfecting a skill. They're bombarded with so much information that they end up concentrating too much on specific aspects of the movement, and they lose sight of the movement as a whole, and performance suffers. Another reason is that when we involve athletes more in the learning process and we make it much more about discovery and empowerment, the learning tends to be a lot more vivid and is retained a lot better than if they are not involved. And an experience from my own life that I used to illustrate this is when I was 2 and I burnt my hand on the iron. Now, my mum had told me for several weeks beforehand not to touch the iron because it was hot and it was going to hurt me, and I ignored her anyway and touched the iron. But obviously when I touched the iron and I burnt my hand, that was the last time that I ever did it. And I never touched the iron again because that learning experience was a lot more vivid and a lot more insightful than just being told by my mum. Now, we're trying to get that same kind of motor learning with our athletes. We're trying to empower them. We're trying to allow them to discover the solution to the problem for themselves, rather than just bombard them with words and potentially confuse them and bottleneck their performance. And this is why knowledge of results can be such a useful addition to a program in improving performance and enhancing motor learning. So I would recommend, if you're an athlete or you're a strength and conditioning coach, that you start to use this with your athletes where possible. If you're an athlete, it's going to enhance your performance a lot quicker, and it's going to enhance your motor learning in the absence of a coach if you don't have one. And if you're a strength and conditioning coach, it's going to speed up the motor learning of your athletes. They're going to retain a lot more of the information that you're giving them, and it's going to potentially allow you to manage a lot bigger group of athletes at the same time. Now, the particular approach that I favor when using knowledge of results with my athletes is to coach throughout the warm-up and throughout the warm-up sets, but then once we actually start the work sets, is to remove myself from the equation and, where possible, only provide my athletes with the information of how they performed on each set. And using this approach with the Elite Academy athletes at London Wasps, we saw some great improvements in performance. A couple of examples which I point to in the video I put together on the top 5 speed training mistakes that are slowing you down on the pitch are Flynn Sager and Liam O'Neill. Using this technique of knowledge of results only throughout our speed training, both of these guys were able to increase their maximal sprinting velocity in a flying 10 by nearly half a meter a second each, which is a massive improvement. And this is without any coaching whatsoever throughout the work sets. If you'd like to use this approach in your own training or that of your athletes, I'd recommend that you start trying to identify exercises that you're able to measure reliably and start to use this in place of verbal information when training your athletes. So, for example, when we do speed, we can use either a stopwatch or speed gates. When we perform things like jumps, plyometrics and medicine ball throws, we can just use a simple tape measure to assess performance. And when we're performing things like Olympic lifts or other ballistic lifts or just traditional barbell exercises in the gym, we have certain tools at our disposal like GymAware, Tendo Unit and Bar Sensei to measure power output and bar velocity to assess performance. Give this technique a try in your own training program and let me know what you think of it. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and share, and if you want more information, go to rugbystrengthcoach.com/blog.